I appreciate y'all coming on in the morning time and getting here early for this. First thing, we'll start out. What do you think is the most challenging part of implementing TARS or strategy in class, seeing as how we have completed 7th and 8th grade social studies implementation for the first round, and then we're currently working on 7th grade math and 8th grade social studies?
The biggest challenge is time. So those math teaks, it's one thing after the other. And just being able to go back and do that reteach.
I think same with social studies, especially because it's so chronological that going back to do the reteach stuff sometimes confuses the kids in making sure that they know, okay, this is back before now, but then continuing on.
Making sure it flows with itself. When we are going back, we're able to tie it in to continue to move forward instead of just always flowing back and trying to find that strength.
Yeah. I would agree. And then next thing, what have you noticed differently now that you've started implementing this strategy in class versus in the fall semester?
I think I found that with small group, it's a lot easier to have data to drive the small group.
Yeah.
When we're doing this, we were given a data point every single week. So there's always something to drive that small group.
Definitely easier to group the small groups too, because you know what each student needs to focus on, so you can group the students based off their need and go from there.
And there's a confidence in the kids because they're seeing that lots of children are having to reteach and coming back to small group. So I'm hearing more discourse in my classroom, asking questions and things like that, because they're comfortable knowing that their peers are also having to be retaught. They're not coming in for tutoring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and really, ultimately, this shouldn't be an extra task that we put on teachers. The whole purpose and the goal is so that it'll help teachers. With what a lot of teachers already are doing in their classroom. A lot of teachers are already pulling small group, but now this helps them by adding the data piece into the small group, so you know what kids exactly to group together, and then what standard exactly and what part of the standard to reteach. What do you think we would need to change, if anything, from our implementation right now? We've done 7th and 8th grade English. We've started 7th grade math, 8th grade social studies. What do you think we should change, if any, for the next implementation?
I think just understanding that all subjects are going to have to approach it a little differently, and that the model that works for ELA is not going to work for math, it's not going to work for social studies, and to make sure that staying within the process and the procedure, but tweaking the little things that need to be tweaked for each subject.
I think it'll come down to, kind of building off of that, like the foundation is the same, but again, math and social studies teaks don't work the same.
Exactly.
And so figuring out, making sure that teachers understand the point of the whole process, but then figuring out the best way to make that work for their kids, for their classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And two subjects are completely different. And so the need that you're going to have in 8th grade social studies is going to be very different than in 8th grade English or 7th grade math or 7th grade science or whatever. But hopefully we will see an increase in the meets percentage and the masters percentage based on the data that we're trying, based on the data that we're using to reteach and based on the data that we're using to pull small groups. That's really about it for today. Is there anything that you're noticing in your class that is going really well or should be changed at all?
Well, using this model, we're focusing on changing the bell curve. We're gonna be able to move, shift it, obviously, and so seeing that shift in it definitely helps.
actually seeing it
Yeah,
work
actually seeing it
and
move.
seeing the kids move. And I think that helps the kids be more confident in seeing their growth too.
That's what I meant.
Thanks for meeting with me so we can go over this. I appreciate that. The first thing is, so far we've implemented in 7th and 8th grade ELAR, and then we have just started in the last 1 to 2 weeks implementing for 7th grade math and 8th grade social studies. What do you notice so far after implementing for reteaches and small groups and data digs for 8th grade social studies and 7th grade math?
I think for us, since everything builds on one another, we're seeing that even going back and doing those reteach after we've moved on to the next era or the next thing is helping them to better understand what we're doing as we continue on chronologically.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think will need to change for future implementation, maybe for 7th grade science or 8th grade science, 7th grade social studies?
I think they're just going to have to tailor it really to how it works within their content. Like I know for us, our content moves so quickly and where testing lands and falls and how early that is. So I think they're going to have to adjust and really hone in on what is the important thing to reteach in that moment. And what is going to be their biggest and most important asset in that reteach.
Yeah. What positives do you expect to see after, let's say, 4 weeks of implementing reteaches and small groups in 8th grade social studies?
I think I'm going to see more of our students understanding and obviously in turn higher scores on those things, especially, like I said, in our social studies content, it just keeps going and they're tested on all of it. So what they learned in August, they still get tested on in April. And so being able to kind of go back and make sure that they have that reteach for something that maybe they didn't understand from October that's still on a test is important. And then I'm seeing them kind of make that achievement and finally get it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, if anything, 7th grade social studies should focus on when they implement? Because they're not STAR tested in 7th grade. What do you think they should focus on to kind of help with vertical alignment, to help with 8th grade?
We do a really good job already at our campus, really trying to align and honing in and focusing on what 7th grade should put more attention on and that kind of stuff in class. So I think really looking at where those items are and those teaks are that continue on. So if it's Bill of Rights or if it's Constitution, those things that they're going to see in 7th grade that they're going to see again in 8th grade as well, those are the ones that are going to be the most important, I think.
Yeah. And then is there anything that you see as a teacher that is just adding more to the plates to teachers and not really helping them as much as we wanted to, that we would kind of need to advise, if anything?
I don't think so within this. I mean, I think a lot of teachers, I think, were doing something similar, but didn't have a real system for it.
Exactly.
So it really kind of lays it out and almost in a sense organizes. So in a sense, I think it's helpful.
Okay. Yeah. And that's really the goal, where it shouldn't just be another thing that's added on, because as teachers, we don't want another thing just added on that it's just extra work we have to do. We want something that's actually going to help. It's actually going to make a difference in, one, our teaching, but two, in student learning.
Absolutely.
Is there any challenges that you expect to encounter with implementation? And this could be with the rest of 8th grade social studies, or it could be with our next round when we start with Algebra 1 and 7th grade science and 8th grade science.
I think it's just adjustment. A lot of the time we get into our routine and we like our routine.
Yeah.
And so having to change something, or even though it may not be a huge change, but changing something minor can sometimes feel like a big thing in the grand scheme of how much we do every day. So I think it's just kind of figuring out ways to make sure that people are open-minded about this change, even though it may very well be something they're really already doing.
Yeah, exactly. And then what is some feedback that you may have gotten from teachers or that you can give from a teacher's perspective on what things are going well or what things may need to be revised or improved?
That once people have kind of jumped on board, for lack of a better way to put it, and understood the real intention behind it, they like it. But it's one getting everybody to understand and really kind of have that buy-in initially. And I think sometimes it's just the struggle of time and that extra planning step that may be, I don't want to say forced, but kind of forced now, saying, okay, I have to do this part right now. Whereas it's, some teachers are just really good and they can kind of fly by the seat of their pants and be like, oh, for small group I can do this. And they'll just pull it out because they have that experience and they're great. But this is really laying it out. And so it's almost an extra step, but a helpful extra step once they see the big picture of it.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And then has there been any impact so far on student engagement in class from an 8th grade social studies perspective?
I think so. Kids are starting to, I guess, kind of see where things began because we teach so much of this led to this, led to this. It's a story. And so now that they're understanding the earlier parts of the story in those reteaches, now the new parts of the story make more sense. So they're engaged, they're more inquisitive, and they're more involved in asking those questions that we really want them to ask ultimately. They're finally getting there.
Yeah. What do you think could lead to more student engagement, kind of going off of that question, in 8th grade social studies?
That's tough. Our content is hard, and sometimes there are kiddos that it's just not their jam. But I think just really figuring out those different ways to reach the different learning styles and touch on it in different ways to help them try to understand it. That's kind of been a push that we've been making, generally speaking, to try to increase that engagement. So doing more hands-on and kind of ingraining things within them instead of just standing in front of the room talking type deal and lecture that so many people assume history is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons why that after we implemented with 7th and 8th grade ELAR, we switched to more of an I do, we do, you do implementation. And so then for the reteach, it would be direct teach for a few minutes, but then students get to work on something based on that direct teach with another student, and then students are taking like an exit ticket of a few questions to see, did you get direct teach, and did you also get the we do?
Yes.
How do you think the leadership team for TARSR implementation can give feedback, better feedback, or more consistent feedback to teachers on this?
I think it's just a matter of the fact that we're all from different disciplines helps because I can tell you right now, someone is going to understand a math classroom and how it works in there much better than I will.
Exactly.
But I think through those teams and those relationships they have with those teams, and potentially even seeing how different teachers are implementing, and kind of emphasizing where, okay, you might want to, maybe you need to go see how so-and-so is doing it because they're doing this part really, really well and yours isn't quite there, but they're really awesome at it, and learn from each other.
Yeah, I feel like that's the best way to definitely learn from other teachers.
Yeah.
And then what growth, if any, have you noticed from students as a result of pulling small groups and honing in on the standards that they may be okay at, but we want them to get better at?
I think we're seeing those kind of bubble kids actually, for lack of a better way to put it, pop the bubble and move up and make that jump because they're getting that very honed in, specific instruction on exactly what they need instead of a big picture general stuff.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it. I appreciate you joining me, but have a good day.
Thanks.